Okay, good evening and welcome to the Wildfire Preparedness Community Meeting. Again, if you need assistance during the presentation, use the Q&A button and our staff will help you. It's my pleasure to introduce Mayor Ron Collins to start the meeting off. Ron, you're muted.
I do apologize. I've been on too many Zoom meetings today. Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us this evening via Zoom. We strive to generate discussion and promote community engagement regardless of the circumstances, and we appreciate your flexibility in joining us this evening. I would like to introduce some staff to you, one of which you've already met, Chuck Lax as our acting deputy fire chief. We also have Jake Trickett, who's the administrative sergeant for the sheriff's office, and Tara Peterson, our assistant city manager, waving at you there. The purpose of tonight's meeting is to inform the community about wildfire threats, emergency preparedness, and available resources. San Carlos, like many other communities, is not immune to the wildfire threat. It's important to discuss emergency preparedness to make sure our community is ready for wildfire events. We appreciate you taking an active interest in educating yourself about this issue. The meeting is being recorded for the benefit of the community members who could not attend. It will be posted to the city website along with an FAQ document compiling common questions asked this evening. I'd also like to thank the fire and other public safety staff who are currently offering aid to our people affected by nearby wildfires. I extend our sincere gratitude for their efforts in keeping our community safe. So thank you again for joining us, and we look forward to the presentation and the Q&A system. I'm now going to turn it back over to our acting deputy fire chief, Chuck Lax, to begin the presentation.
Thank you, Mayor Collins. And good evening, everybody, and thank you for joining us this evening. A few logistics as we move through the presentation. Again, if you have any need for assistance, use the Q&A button and our staff will assist you. And if during the presentation you have any questions, again, you could use the Q&A button to submit those questions. And if you have additional questions, you can email them to citymanager@cityofsancarlos.org to be answered on our website's frequently asked questions. All right. Again, thank you very much for taking time out of your evening to join us for this discussion tonight. It is a webinar format, so I'll be doing a lot of the talking along with Jake to get the information to you. We do have several slides to go through, a couple of short videos, but this is, a very important topic for us to have discussion about, something that we take very serious here in San Carlos, and something that I've been involved with in San Carlos going back to 1991 when I started as a wildfire prevention assistant in San Carlos. So let me go over some of the things that we're going to be talking about this evening. We're going to be talking about the current fire that's going on in the county. We're going to talk about wildfire emergency response, what we're seeing our homeowners do to reduce vegetation to their properties. We're going to talk about community education and communication with the community, what's currently taking place in our city parks with regards to vegetation reduction, evacuations, and alert wildfire cameras. So currently, as we're all aware of the CZU August lightning complex that is in the southern part of San Mateo County and in Santa Cruz County, I did gather some information to share with everybody. And this was as of yesterday, the information that was available from our county OES office, that the fire has consumed 85,218 acres. And within San Mateo County, that encompassed 10 to 12,000 acres. As of yesterday, the fire was at 43% containment and had consumed 54 structures in San Mateo County. Currently, damage assessment is being conducted, so we would anticipate that number to increase slightly for structures destroyed. Currently, there's a local assistance center set up in Pescadero Elementary School to assist those residents with going to one location so that they would be able to get in touch with all the different government agencies that they'll need assistance with, like FEMA, DMV, and such. So that's nice to know that that's already underway. Locally, we supported that incident. We sent 2 resources to that incident, Engine 12 and Engine 512. They are back, and I am pleased to report that they had no injuries while they were there. They were engaged in a lot of activities while they were there, like we all were able to see on the news. We're very proud of our employees that were part of that incident. I also just want to make sure everyone is aware that when we get the request for those resources to go to an incident like that or another large incident throughout the state, that they immediately respond from the station to those incidents, and then we work at backfilling the fire station after they leave, as was the case for both resources that we deployed to that incident. And we also had individual firefighters and fire captains at several of the other fires throughout the state in overhead assignments. And what we mean by that is they went to those incidents to assist with the management team that was put in place, working on plans, updating maps, and working on communication within those incidents. So let's switch into what's happening in our parks. I'm really excited to let everybody know that we've been working on a $500,000 FEMA grant for a little over 2 years, and we got the green light to move forward with the grant, and we got some goats in Big Canyon Park that started on Saturday. I'm going to have a slide coming up that shows some pictures of that, but this is a really big chunk of vegetation reduction that's going to occur in Eaton Park, Big Canyon Park, Crestview Park, and Highlands Park. We started this project last year with vegetation reduction in those parks as well as Arguello Park, and we were able to clean up 48 acres last year. So taking advantage of the work that occurred last year, this year we're going to tackle 82 acres and continue that as we move forward every year. So here's a couple of pictures I took on Sunday, out checking how the goats were doing. They're about a third of the way through their work to be done in Big Canyon Park. We anticipate them finishing up next week in Big Canyon Park, where they'll move to Eaton Park. And then following the goats in Big Canyon Park, we're going to have hand crews and some heavy equipment where appropriate come in to do some work in the park of continuing to thin out vegetation, remove dead vegetation, and limb up trees. And then the goats will continue on to Eaton Park, like I said, on to Crestview Park, and then to Highlands Park, where they'll be followed by the hand crews and the heavy equipment where appropriate. So here's some pictures of what we're trying to accomplish. This was pictures of some work last year in Highlands Park and Crestview Park. Some kind of before and after pictures where you could see a lot of vegetation, where afterwards we've cleaned it up, limbed up trees, and this is all in an effort to help slow and stop the spread of a fire. So I did take a little drive around town in preparing for this presentation. Got a couple really great pictures of some of the work that we are seeing happening out with our property owners. And as you can see, you know, we have a program in place where we email out notices to all of the residents that live west of the Alameda, that it's that time of year to get the weed whacker out, so to say, and do some vegetation management on your own property. And then we follow that up with having our engine crews drive through the neighborhoods, looking for properties that have not had any work done. We work at getting in touch with those properties and getting that work cleaned up. We did receive several questions about this topic and about what to do where neighbors have not yet had a chance to clean up their properties. And we encourage you to reach out to those neighbors and ask them, or you could reach out to the fire department and we could go ask the neighbors. Later in the presentation, I'll share our admin phone number for everybody to give us a call if you need some assistance with that issue. So let's kind of go over what's happening and where we are. And I think this diagram really kind of helps us explain that fire seasons are longer and fires are getting larger. And this has been going on for a while. This graph will be updated in 2022, and we could imagine that will be a big increase as we've seen several large fires over the last couple of years. Another big factor in the growth of fires is the drought conditions. So we have experienced several years of drought. Last year, we did have a wetter season, and we did see less fires last year than we did in the previous couple of years. This year, we do have some drought conditions in Northern California, and it's no surprise that we are seeing fire activity in Northern California. So, we keep seeing and hearing on the news about biggest fire in history, most acres burned in history. And I think we're at the point now where we have to say this is the new normal. And this is what's occurring around the state. Increased temperatures, intense wind events, development in the WUI area. We've seen that here in San Carlos. Sometimes it's a good thing. Sometimes it creates homes that are in dangerous positions with the vegetation that exists. I know we have had some developments in our community, and I do like to see some development in some of those pockets which do help decrease the fuel load in those areas. So like I said, sometimes it's good and sometimes it's bad, but we do a lot of planning before we see developments go in. And a lot of that has to do with the construction materials that are used on these homes and their vegetation plan. We've also had a lot of issues with legacy infrastructure. PG&E, for example, over the last several years, we've seen a lot of fires contributed to issues with infrastructure with PG&E. I also hit on one of the questions that we had received about our a few narrow roads that we have in San Carlos. And we are aware of the narrow roads. We are evaluating what would be appropriate areas on those roads to potentially have some no parking to allow residents to be able to leave their neighborhood, at the same time to allow first responders to enter that neighborhood. So we have had some delays with that project due to COVID, unfortunately, but it is something that we are going to continue to move forward with and evaluate. Although I am happy that most of those streets are isolated to neighborhoods, they are not major thoroughfares to evacuate, a big, large portion of the city. So let's talk about response. I'm going to spend a little bit of time on this slide. I didn't want to create too many slides for the presentation this evening, but I want to make sure.
Chuck, if you don't mind, I'm going to interrupt just for a second. Could you just define what WUI is for the audience?
Yeah, the Wildland Urban Interface that we call WUI. And I hope that that is enough for everybody. Sorry for using the acronym. So moving on to our response. And so we're very fortunate here in San Mateo County, where our fire departments up and down the peninsula respond to emergencies as one fire department out of one dispatch center. And so what I mean by that is we send the closest fire apparatus to an emergency, whether it's a medical aid, a traffic accident, a structure fire, a wildland fire, whatever the nature of the call is. And so really when we look at what resources that we have available to us here in San Carlos, it's the entire fire service within San Mateo County, as well as the rest of the resources throughout the state of California through our mutual aid agreement that we have. So when we talk specifically about wildland fire response, we need to recognize that we've determined a mutual threat zone and the state responsibility area, we call it SRA. And in San Carlos, the mutual threat zone is everything west of the Alameda de las Pulgas. And what that means is if we have a wildland fire west of Alameda de las Pulgas, we get local fire resources that respond as well as a state response. So if we have a wildland high dispatch day or a red flag warning day, if you'd want to call it that, I'm going to kind of rattle off some numbers here for everybody. But on the local government side, so that's from our cities, so from San Carlos and Redwood City and Belmont and San Mateo, we'll send 6 engines, 3 battalion chiefs, and 1 water tender. And then at the same time, the state will respond with 6 Type 3 engines, 2 bulldozers, 2 fire hand crews, an air attack, 2 air tankers, and 1 helicopter. So rarely do we see all those resources show up on the scene of an incident that we have in that area when we have a wildland fire. Our theory is that we're gonna dispatch a lot of resources to the fire very early, put the fire out while it's small, and then cancel the resources that aren't needed. And of course, this is just on a first alarm assignment, the initial assignment that would be dispatched when somebody would call 911 to report a wildland fire in our community. And then from there, we would grow to second alarm, third alarm, all the way up to 5, 6 alarms, sorry. And then we would start reaching out to our neighboring counties for support. So our ability to get resources into our community quickly is something I want to make sure everybody is aware of, and that it kind of hits on what we talked about earlier, that when we do send our resources out, we backfill those stations because we always want to make sure our community is protected as well. At the same time that's occurring, law enforcement is part of the response, as well as our county OES, and we form a unified command. And what we're trying to do is gain control over what is going on through that and have a way for us to order additional resources through a single point. So one incident command post will order the resources back through our dispatch center, which facilitates better communication and helps reduce the complexity of the incident. So how we manage these incidents is through the incident command system. And so what we do is we break the incident down into manageable bite-sized pieces for everyone that's involved in the incident. And it's not just about the response part. There's also going to be the planning section part about getting more resources and what resources are we going to need. The logistical section about making sure we've got enough food and equipment to take care of all the personnel that are on the incident, keeping track of our costs. And what we do is we try to make it so that one person isn't supervising more than 5 or 7 people, and that everybody knows who their supervisor is. This has been a system that really got introduced into the fire service out of Southern California, and it's been so successful, it's now the system that's used across the country. So now moving on into our education and communication. Tonight we are going to watch a short video on Ready, Set, Go. This is an education piece that we've been using in our community now for a couple of years. It's always a good video to watch every once in a while. It really is full of some really great information. And then let's talk a little bit about how to get information and how we can notify the community. One of the ways is through SMC Alert. I have the website listed here at www.smcalert.info. where you could go and sign up to receive alerts. And this is a great tool. We will talk about this again later in the presentation, as well as Sergeant Jake Trickett will also hit on this again, and I will bring this website back up again if you've missed it so that you could get a picture of it later in the presentation. Okay, we're going to move into the video section. I hope you enjoyed the video.
The massive wildfire exploded early Thursday. Mediterranean climate, another fire siege of that magnitude is just a matter of time. I'm CAL FIRE's Daniel Berlant. Devastating wildfires occur every year across the state, putting lives, property, and the state's natural resources at a constant threat. In California, wildfires aren't a question of if, but only a question of when. If you choose to live near a natural area of the state, you are at risk for wildfires, and it's your responsibility to prepare yourself, your family, and your home. And that preparation starts with 3 simple steps. Ready, set, go. Getting ready before wildfire happens is a vital first step in protecting yourself and your property. Beginning in the spring months, well before the peak of fire season, you should carefully assess your property and start taking steps to prepare for the hotter months to come.
As firefighters are responding to fires throughout California, one of the most important things they can look for is defensible space.
Defensible space is the required 100 feet between your property and the surrounding wildland area. Defensible space has consistently been shown to be the best, most practical first line of defense for your home against wildfires. Adequate defensible space provides a barrier to slow, or in some cases even halt, the progress of fire that would otherwise engulf your property. It also helps ensure the safety of firefighters while they defend your home.
I'm going to have to go to homes that provide some type of clearance for my firefighters. I cannot go to a home that needs has brush and everything growing right up to it. I've got to pick a home where I can safely make a stand, and if we get stuck there, that we can survive it as well.
When the destructive lightning siege fires burned throughout California in 2008, defensible space once again proved to be a key element around the homes that survived, while many homes without adequate clearance were not as fortunate. But defensible space isn't the only factor in protecting your property. Another critical step is hardening your home. During a wildfire, loose flying embers can find weak points on the outside of your home. Hardening your home means reinforcing these vulnerabilities. CAL FIRE Battalion Chief Nick Schuler demonstrates some of the components of a well-defended home.
As you see here, they have an excellent green belt around their home. All of their trees are limbed up, so there's no dead and dying vegetation around their home. And as you can see, as we walk along, all the leaf litter's been picked up, and we move straight into the fire-resistant construction. They have the stucco siding, they have the enclosed eaves, and the composite roof, all proactive steps that this homeowner's taken to reduce fire potential.
Now that you have your home ready for a wildfire, it's time to get set by preparing your most valuable assets, your life and the lives of your family. You should start by creating a wildfire action plan. A wildfire action plan gives you and your family a chance to plan out and write down important information and special preparations that you'll need to take as a wildfire approaches.
As part of your wildfire action plan, you want to sit down with your family and talk about things like escape routes, what roads are you going to take when you leave the house, and the other thing is where are you going to go. You want to have a meeting location.
Your family's plan will be unique depending on your circumstances, so it's vital that you practice and update it regularly to keep everybody prepared. It's also important to plan which belongings in your house you'll need to take with you in case of evacuation if you have time.
Prepare what you're going to take with you when you leave. There's nothing worse than packing up to leave and you realize you didn't take anything that you really wanted to. You took stuff that just was the first thing you saw.
Wildfires can move quickly and can change direction into a surrounding community without warning. With the assurance that your home is now well defended and your family's wildfire action plan in place, when a wildfire approaches, you're now ready to go. During a wildfire, emergency personnel may not be able to warn everybody, so it's up to you to take the initiative to stay informed by listening to the TV or radio for announcements. If an evacuation is imminent, it's time to set your wildfire action plan into motion. Don't wait to be ordered to leave your residence. Just go, and go early. By leaving early, you give your family the best chance of surviving a wildfire.
Follow the directions of fire and law enforcement, and if you feel threatened, you need to go ahead and get out of that home. We have a lot of systems in place to notify you of that, but you have to be willing to get out and get out early.
Although wildfires can be unpredictable, destructive, and deadly, they're an undeniable part of California's wildland. Wildfire is coming, and it's the steps you take now that will ensure you, your family, and your home have a fighting chance when it happens. For more information on how to prepare for wildfires and for a wildfire action plan checklist, visit readyforwildfire.org.
Okay, I hope everybody enjoyed that video. It might have been a repeat for some people, but it is time for me to introduce Sergeant Jake Trickett, who's going to take the next couple of slides on evacuation.
Thank you, Chief. Good evening, everybody. My name is Jake Trickett with the Sheriff's Office, currently assigned to the San Carlos Police Bureau. Tonight, I'm going to talk a little about the evacuation process, what to expect at times, and also what you can do to prepare for evacuations should you be faced with that type of scenario. So one of the most frequent asked questions with these meetings that we have and outside these meetings is, what can we do to prepare? And that's a very crucial step by taking some time ahead of an event to plan for the unlikely scenario. In the chance it happens, you're just that much more ahead. We'll give you some examples of how to create a go bag or go kit, some things you might want to consider. Other items are know the areas around your residence or where the area you may have to evacuate. One of the questions we see a lot is, what's my evacuation route? I think it's very important that we recognize with fires, 99.9% of the time, we don't know where a fire could start. And that's not to strike or instill any paranoia, it's just a sense of awareness. So that being said, we can't always determine what the exact route is for that event. It all depends on where a fire and how large the fire, which direction it's moving. That would determine the evacuation routes. And we're going to show you a tool here in the next slide pretty soon on how we as first responders can help better coordinate getting resources to the community during the event of an evacuation. An example of routes, dedicated routes would be something like a tsunami zone. Out on the coast, many of you who visit out there, you have probably seen the signs that say tsunami evacuation zone or route. That's because majority of the tsunamis are probably going to come from the Pacific Ocean, and we have an idea of where that is. So the goal is to get to high ground. Again, with fires, it's a little bit different. So the things that you can do is go for a drive or a walk around your neighborhood. Take a look at the roads in and out of your neighborhoods so you have an idea of what might be the best route depending on the situation. With our role as law enforcement to assist with evacuations is we're going to assist with notices, and that can be either a warning or an order. Now, an evacuation warning is kind of like it's just that, it's a warning. It's to give notice that you may need to prepare to evacuate, or be in your best interest to, if you haven't already, have things put together to do so now, in that chance that there is an order. An order to evacuate means just that. We are ordering the residents or occupants of that structure, that area, to leave due to the approaching threat. Keep in mind that that order, it's an order, and we have people that have said, I'm going to stay. You have to understand that by doing that, you're accepting all risk, and that we can't always guarantee safety, that we can come back for you, for your safety and the other first responders. that we have to continue to other residences, to other structures, to continue to make notice. So we don't take orders lightly. That's something that we want to hold off pulling that lever until absolutely necessary, but please do take those serious. Now, as far as alerting, there's many methods of alerting. Some of you are probably signed up for SMC Alert or San Mateo County Alert. That's a text-based or cell-based notification through text message, email, and that allows us to put out messaging for incidents such as this. And there's different methods or ratings or ranks of messaging. It can be a normal alert, or it can be a high priority alert to signify it's a significant event. Reverse 911 calls or cell phone calls, that's where we would utilize dispatch to do a reverse 911, which would have dispatch call with an automated message to every residence that we have on the network. Door to door, when all else fails, we do door to door. I can tell you that's what we were doing recently. Many of us were out on the coast just as early as last week. And this week, helping with evacuations, some late nights, but our goal is to make contact as many as we could. And there was a lot of door-to-door contacts. TV, radio, when possible, if we can coordinate through local television or radio stations to get alerting out and messaging, we will. And social media, many of you follow different government platforms on various social media channels like Facebook, Instagram, channels like that. That could be another method of notification. Some considerations, vulnerable or vulnerability. Recognize individuals in your household who may have some mobility issues or also some limitations that may be difficult to get around. Again, if you can plan for those ahead of time, it's going to make it that much smoother and easier and less stressful during the unlikely event of evacuation. We talked about your travel routes. It's amazing how many of us are become very complacent in our day-to-day travels, and we don't understand or not understand, we don't recognize the streets around us or the names of the streets. Take the time to go look at those, like I said, make it a household event. This is National Preparedness Month, so it could be a good exercise and something to brush up on. Refugee areas or evacuation centers, those are areas that are going to be established during an evacuation or leading up to an evacuation. That's going to be all dependent on logistics, availability of an area that's large enough to accommodate up to neighborhoods or city or regions. So you can imagine, and then there may be multiple evacuation centers, and the goal is to give some sort of direction for people evacuating to help give them resources immediately. Next slide, please. So we're going to show you a quick video. This is called Zonehaven. This is a platform that greatly assists first responders during the unified command that Chief Lack spoke about earlier in coordinating evacuation efforts. And we're able to select zones or evacuation zones, which we can push this information out to responders that may be coming in from outside the area that don't know this neighbor or this area as well as your staff always assigned here. So this allows them to be more efficient and effective in evacuations. Please keep in mind that evacuations are nothing new for first responders. This is just a tool that further enhances our ability, but we're still more than capable of conducting these type of evacuations or events without technology like this. It just does make it so much more effective. Go ahead, sir.
We're looking here at the first responder application of the evacuation management platform. What this does is it gives first responders a county-wide view of all the different zones in San Mateo County. The last 5 months have been spent conducting hundreds of meetings, hundreds of hours with every fire and law enforcement agency in the county to really ensure that all of our zones have the same kind of features in the way that they were created as well as the way that they were numbered. If we look really quick at one of these zones, first responders have the ability to actually look at some really important information, such as the population, the number of structures, parcels, and whatnot. It also gives information such as the fire agency and the law enforcement agency for that area, as well as critical infrastructure. And that could be schools, it could be hospital, it could be boarding care facilities that are vital to ensure that they get some attention during evacuations. When first responders have a fire or an emergency that occurs and they need to come in here and actually call for an evacuation, what we talk about is that kind of one-click method for evacuations. First responders are now able to come in here and actually call for evacuations and automate the entire process just by doing those 2 clicks. And you see that this zone is actually now red. What this map shows is the area that's under an evacuation order to anybody who views the map, including 911 centers, our OES partners, all fire and law enforcement officers. After an area has been evacuated, it's also really important to look at the fact that first responders now have the ability to look at current road conditions. So the green, the yellow, the red. If we were to evacuate an area and road conditions were to change and we'd get some really big kind of choke points, law enforcement officers could actually deploy to those intersections, those critical intersections, and get traffic moving or perform some traffic flows, maybe opposing possibly, to get traffic out of that evacuated zone. So it gives us a real-time picture about what's going on. This is kind of one of the features of many of this evacuation platform, but it's probably the most important and most critical to highlight is just the fact that first responders have a platform that they can actually come together, call for evacuations using common language, and actually get evacuations called for in a format and a way that everybody who needs to know about them can actually see them.
So on the note or topic of evacuations in Zonehaven, I think it's important to recognize that there have been hundreds of hours from law enforcement, fire, and other emergency managers and city officials or employees contributing to this database. It's quite robust. It's moving along, and it's really going to, again, streamline evacuation process. We've spent a lot of time looking at our main thoroughfares, areas of concern for traffic. Again, that's another question that comes up about traffic control. We can use that and identify key areas or intersections, and we may want to staff with X number of law enforcement or other first responders to assist with traffic control to help keeping the egress or evacuation traffic. Sometimes we aren't letting people back into that area because the goal is to clear people out and help protect life. And when we have people trying to come back in, that could be problematic because we may miss someone if we pass a house and they try to come back to a house that we don't plan on going back to. So it's important to know that. And again, with this type of a system, or 100 law enforcement out on the coast, and we were able to give directions to multiple law enforcement from outside the agency and outside the area who are unfamiliar to help better guide them or direct them on areas that they needed to focus on. We're going to talk real quick about an emergency supply kit. There's many names that go by, kits, earthquake kits. You can call whatever you want. It has the same goal and same mission. And that's just to be prepared for you to be able to sustain for a short period of time to get back on your feet. It's really important if you can take the time ahead of an event, obviously, to prepare, because then you're not under the pressure or stress of being in a hurry and missing things. Again, this can be a household fun, or maybe not so fun, but necessary Friday or Saturday night, and you spend an hour or two and going around and identifying what's important to everybody. You may want to limit, I know my household, I'd probably have to limit how many bags would be a part of this. But it's important to do the certificates, social security cards, things like that. You can either have them in some sort of box or container, a secure container that you can easily take with you, or make many of those copies and back them up on a secure thumb drive, like an encrypted thumb drive, or even a cloud system to store that digitally, so you don't have to worry about having those backups with you. They're in the cloud. It's important to consider necessary medications that you or anyone in the household may need. You having, again, copies or knowing that you have your insurance cards is good to have in case you do need medical attention after the event. You should have identifying information on you, such as a passport, your driver's license, identification card. Those will help, especially with evacuation centers, for processing to help confirm that you are coming from an evacuation area. As much as I hate to say, you'd be surprised at how many people do take advantage of situations and try to obtain free resources when they are part of the area that was evacuated. It's unfortunate, but it's a reality. And it also helps us to, again, provide the evacuees with more resources as this event continues. It's always a good idea to have some cash on hand in the event of an emergency, if possible. Credit cards, another form of payment. A cell phone and a charger. Charger is huge, whether it be a car charger, a wall charger, or even a portable battery charger. Your vehicles, anytime that your vehicle is starting to get to that halfway mark in the that vehicle, it's always a good idea in the filling of gas stations for a few days, if not longer. So having that reserve is always a nice thing. Food and water, if you can have just some basic staples to allow you to be able to sustain for a few days, that's great, at the least a few hours. That's going to be more of a comfort thing, especially for those of you with little ones or people who do rely on substance to kind of maintain health. You want to consider some items. Flashlights with batteries. Spare batteries are a must. Check those items periodically. This is something that you could do even twice a year, just to make sure that all those things are functioning and things haven't expired. Seasonal clothing. We're very fortunate being in the peninsula with the Mediterranean climate that our weather here is very mild most of the time, but it doesn't hurt to have a windbreaker or a jacket, something that you can layer in the off chance that you are going to be out in the elements for a little bit, that you can be at least a little comfortable. Toiletries, that I think doesn't need any further explanation of why you'd want that. And then N95 mask. And that's not only for COVID-19, but also because in the event of a fire, as we're experiencing right now, you do have some smoke in the air that can be uncomfortable for some. It can be problematic for those with medical conditions such as asthma. So having some N95 mask in your bag, it doesn't hurt, or some sort of face covering. At the end of this presentation, there'll be some other resources or links to where you can find more guides or direction on how to prepare your own kit. This is just a very basic example. Obviously, yours may vary and it depends on the needs of your household, but we highly encourage you to consider something like this between preparing an evacuation kit, knowing the routes around your home, having a plan of where you would link up, where you would go during some sort of event like this. If everything else was unavailable, that will really save you a lot of headache and heartache in the long run if the unlikely event of an evacuation occurs.
Thank you, Sergeant Trickett. Okay, moving on. Let's talk a little bit about alert wildfire cameras. This is an exciting project. It's been in the works for a little while, and it's been going on throughout the Western United States. So this isn't something that's new. But we are going to see a large multi-county system come into San Mateo County. Just so everyone has an understanding of what these cameras are capable of doing is that one, visually, you'll be able to see smoke from a fire, and two, be able to sense the heat that's from the fire too. So the cameras would be operating 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, and rotating in their line of view, and always monitoring for a wildfire. As you can see in the picture we have on the screen, all those dots actually represent cameras that are already in place. As the peninsula is a little light compared to other parts of the Bay Area right now, I am excited to let everybody know that we do have 2 cameras in San Mateo County at Jasper Ridge and Access Allen Peak, as well as cameras coming to our community college campuses and 7 other sites on radio repeaters in San Mateo County, one of which will be in San Carlos. I do have a link to their website that will be up at the end of the presentation for anybody to be able to go and get any more information about the alert wildfire cameras. So let's give everybody a little update on PG&E's public safety power shutoffs, known as PSPS. And so let me get my sheet of paper here. Sorry about that. PG&E is working on the installation of sectionalizing equipment meant to reduce the overall footprint of PSPS. That being said, the 2019 PSPS footprint in San Carlos was relatively minimal compared with other communities in San Mateo County. Wildfire Preparedness website now includes information on PG&E's PSPS events with resources on how residents and businesses can prepare for power shutoffs, types of services for those needing special care, and how to receive the most up-to-date alerts from PG&E. You should soon be receiving a San Carlos specific PSPS community guide in your mailbox that will outline PSPS resources and preparedness tips. This is also available on the city's website. During a PSPS, the city will also be implementing zero power communications, which will help provide our community with important updates, even if you lose cell phone or internet service. Zero power communication methods may include message boards with important updates displayed on city streets, posted information updates at city buildings, parks, or other locations close to affected neighborhoods, in-person communications through volunteers or door hangers. If a PSPS event significantly impacts San Carlos, the city may also open up community resource centers at some of our city facilities to offer comfort resources for our residents without power. Resources may include electric device charging, Wi-Fi, and information updates. So here's a list of links to get more information on wildfire preparedness resources, PG&E PSPS, City of San Carlos PSPS resources, Zonehaven, and alert wildfire cameras. I'll leave it up here just for another 30 seconds or so to give anybody the ability if they want to take a picture or a screenshot. Okay, continuing on. Okay, we did receive several questions as people signed up in advance for tonight's preparedness meeting. And some of these questions I have listed here, we received multiple times. So I wanted to take an opportunity to address some of these questions. And so let's start with what are the most basic steps a family can take to prepare for a possible evacuation? And we do recognize that it does and can feel overwhelming, but our suggestion is to start first with a plan and then to build from there. As was what talked about a couple times during the presentation, there are a bunch of resources available through the links that we had just saw for you to go and get a lot of information to assist you through that process. Moving on. How do we get timely notifications of evacuation orders? Sergeant Trickett did a great job of listing all the ways that timely notifications get sent out. And if any of those were to fail, you would have somebody come knock on your door. But again, I've listed the SMC Alert Info website here at www.smcalert.info, where you could go to sign up to receive alerts from SMC Alert. Another popular question is how much notice and how long do we have to evacuate once the order is given? So once the order is given, the expectation is that you would evacuate at that point and grab your go bag and go. I just want to make sure everyone's aware there is a difference between an evacuation warning and the order. With the warning, that means you should be gathering all of the things that you would want to bring with you until the order is given. The other piece I really want to emphasize here is you do not need to wait for an evacuation order to be given to evacuate your neighborhood. We encourage people to get out early, avoid the crowds, and then go someplace safe to monitor what's happening back in that neighborhood. How can land around a home be prepared to reduce flammability? So we did see some good information in the video that we watched on Ready, Set, Go. We do have additional information on the fire department website under emergency preparedness. There's a lot of options for people to do in planning different kind of vegetation. You could also reach out to landscapers to have them assist you with that project. So we really encourage people to really come up with a plan of a defensible space around your home. Please discuss how to deal with pine trees that have grown within 10 feet of a house. There's a lot of parts to this question. We do want to keep that vegetation away from your house, especially if it's overhanging your roof or a chimney. We do understand that there's certain times of year that we don't want to cut trees because we don't want the tree to die. But what we do need to do is come up with a plan of when and how we're going to get that tree cut back from the home. Okay, this does bring us to our last slide. Do you have the administrative phone number for the fire department on this slide? You could use that number to get in touch with me if you have any follow-up questions for me that you would like to speak to me about, as well as what we talked about earlier. If you are concerned about some vegetation in your neighborhood and you would like one of our fire prevention officers to come out and take a look. So that's where that number is, as well as we have the website here for the frequently asked questions from tonight's meeting. We will list all of the questions and answers on that website, but please give us a couple of weeks to gather all that information and have that posted there. So at this time, we will take some questions and answer any questions that had not been answered during any part of the presentation.
So this question came in and it says, on average, how many red flag warning days do we have in this area each year?
That's a good question. I don't know the exact answer. I will say, though, that it's not frequent. We're pretty fortunate to not have red flag warnings in our area. We do hear on our local news, and I hear this a lot. I do watch the news every day, and there are a lot of red flag warnings, but our community will not be part of that red flag warning. So you might hear about more red flag warnings than we are actually having in our community. But we will, I could work at gathering the last 3 years of data and have that be one of the questions that's answered on our FAQ. Thank you, Tara.
You're welcome. Another question came in. What are the rules and guidelines around eucalyptus trees?
That's a good question. We do have eucalyptus trees in San Carlos. If people are going to have those on their property, we would expect that they're maintaining them, cleaning up the vegetation that falls off of those trees, making sure they're not, within 10 feet of a structure. And so those would be the requirements. If somebody wanted to have that tree on their property, that would be our expectation.
And the last is more of a comment, not a question. One of our listeners is a medical provider, and she says, since N95 masks are not available to the public as they are reserved for first responders and medical staff, there are N95 with valves available to the public. And if they just tape off the valve itself, then that can be a very good solution for masks. And with that, that's all the questions we had that had not been answered in your presentation. Just a second, another question's come in. Let me check on that first.
Okay.
So this question is about neighbors not taking care of their own vegetation. What can a neighbor who's concerned about that do?
Yep. We get that phone call often at our administrative number that's on the screen right now at 650-780-7400. We take down the information of where that's occurring at, and then we send out a fire prevention officer to go investigate, and then we get in touch with that property owner and request and follow up with having them remove any dead or dying vegetation that's, you know, within that 100 feet of their house or a neighboring house.
Okay, another question came in regarding the gate at Crestview and Hallmark. Are there any plans to widen that gate?
There have been discussions between council members from San Carlos and Belmont about widening that gate, but their meetings seem to have been delayed due to COVID. So I don't have any other update than that at this time.
Okay, the next question is, what direction do the dangerous winds come from that impact San Carlos?
So in our traditional fire season, we would have winds come from the east and below to the west. And those are the winds like we experienced when we had the Oakland Hills fire. And so those concern us, those hot, warmer winds. Traditionally, an onshore breeze tends to be a cooler with more moisture in the air. And that helps suppress and decrease fire activity.
That is all the questions that we have.
Okay. Well, I would like to thank everybody for joining us tonight. We're right at the hour mark. Again, thank you for taking time out of your evening. Follow up with the frequently asked questions in a couple of weeks when those are posted. And if you have any other follow-up questions, you could use the phone number that's on the screen to get in touch with me. I hope everybody has a nice evening. Thank you.